Okay, let's spend a few moments just generating bodhicitta motivation first. Make sure what we're doing is virtuous. So check your own mind. Think about participating in this session for the next 2 hours, reviewing what His Holiness the Dalai Lama spoke about this morning, his introductory remarks, and then also his brief teaching on his 37 practices by Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo, and the beginning of the 3 principal aspects of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa. So countless sentient beings who are now in different forms, as human beings, animals, hungry ghosts, hell beings, so forth, have all been our kind friends and family since the beginning of us lives in samsara. And all of them, just like us, are experiencing suffering again and again and again, from moment to moment, hour to hour, life to life. For this purpose, Shakyamuni Buddha became fully enlightened and then came to this earth to teach the Holy Dharma. And then these great Tibetan masters, Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo, Lama Tsongkhapa, and now His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, they've spent their entire lives studying and trying to practice the Buddha's teachings, not for selfish reasons whatsoever, or for wealth, or for worldly pleasure, but solely in order to benefit other sentient beings like us, as well as themselves. So for this purpose, they've composed these texts. His Holiness is giving this teaching. So likewise, may we also, not for any selfish reason or for worldly pleasure, but in order solely to be free from suffering of samsara ourselves, and to free all sentient beings from suffering of samsara, and lead them to the peerless state of full enlightenment. And for that reason, we engage in this session. Okay. So just like last night, then I'll go through the main points. I'll try to make it a little more brief than I did last night. The main points of His Holiness kind of introductory remarks. And then we'll briefly read through the verses that His Holiness commented on today. And again, I'll emphasize some of the quotations that His Holiness cited. Right? So that's, yeah, anyway, I'll share my screen with you when I do that. Okay, so His Holiness started off by saying that he's a bhikshu, a fully ordained monk in the Milosevastavardhan tradition. And then there's 2 other Vinaya traditions, one in the Theravadan countries, I forgot what it's called, and then the Dharmagupta tradition in Chinese Buddhist countries. Then His Holiness said the main message of Buddhist teachings is to subdue our minds. That in the world, although there's been extensive material development of our material resources, our food, clothing, shelter, and so forth, those things don't ultimately bring happiness. So the only way to really bring lasting happiness to our minds is to subdue our minds, to improve the state of our minds, to eliminate afflictive emotions and generate love, loving compassion, kindness, and also wisdom, realizing emptiness. So then His Holiness is saying all religions. So this first major point here was kind of like this. All the world's major religions have different methods to subdue the mind, right? They all offer us methods to generate loving kindness, compassion, more patience, honesty, better relationships with our friends and family, and our community, among nations. So they're all similar in that way. But in the theistic religions, they mainly depend upon faith. Having faith, supplicating God, praying to God, or following different advices based on faith. And even in India, since the last 3,000 years, especially, there's been a strong teachings and practice of nonviolence and compassion, karuna. And the Buddha grew up and he studied and practiced in this kind of ancient, basically Hindu tradition, ancient Indian traditions. But then the Buddha saw that for some people with a particular kind of disposition, and particular kind of aspiration, then they need a unique path to be free from suffering and to perfectly subdue, perfectly train their minds. So for that reason, then the Buddha taught a slightly different path. And the path that the Buddha taught is not based on faith, but more based on reason and analysis and philosophy. And then so the Buddha taught different philosophical systems and taught very subtle, very deep, very profound explanations for the kind of suffering we experience, why we experience the suffering, why it's possible, what is the root cause of suffering we experience, and why it's possible to utterly eliminate that from our minds, right? So this is a point His Holiness is coming back, as mentioned, brought up yesterday. So this has to do with, the suffering we experience and why we experience it. It's the first of two of the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of the origins of suffering. And then the possibility of eliminating, all suffering because it all arises from one fundamental cause, and it's possible to eliminate that cause has to do with the truth of cessation. So His Holiness brings up again and again the truth of cessation and the importance of realizing why it's possible to bring about the cessation of suffering. So then the second major point His Holiness again made is about the Nalanda tradition, that the Nalanda tradition emphasizes the importance of rational analysis and investigation and reason to distinguish what's true and what's not true, what's a valid path of practice and what's not a valid path of practice. And then to use that reasoning analysis in order to transform our minds, right? Instead of just a faith-based practice. So His Holiness was saying this is probably uncommon to Buddhism, to use just pure reason and analysis to understand what our fundamental problems are and how to eliminate them. It's probably something unique to Buddhism among the different religious and philosophical traditions. And then His Holiness said, I continually read and contemplate the works of Nagarjuna and his spiritual sons, like Aryadeva, Buddha Palita, Chandakirti, and so forth. And then he's speaking to the audience. He was saying, you are not convert Buddhists, but this is part of your own religious tradition, your religious heritage. You're born to Buddhist, because the people in the audience are all from Buddhist countries in Asia. So he's saying, whereas Western people, mostly they're converts to Buddhism. It's not the religion of their parents. So they have to be a little careful to, because things can easily become confusing, right? If we're convert to a different religion than that of our parents and that of our culture. One is that, because His Holiness to say, we have to be careful about spreading a new religion in our own countries, our own societies, because it can be threatening to people and cause kind of conflict. He was saying, like, imagine that, we're from like a Buddhist, traditional Buddhist culture. When Christians or people from outside come into our areas and start spreading and proselytizing, missionaries come and spread a new religion, how kind of it can be a little, something people don't like, right? So we have to be careful not to do that. But then His Holiness was mentioning some of his Western students, they say, yes, I grew up in like a Christian, Christian religion, but because it's so strongly appealing to faith and not much to reason, then I found very difficult to accept. Yeah, that's my own experience, very much. So then His Holiness saying, when we see conflict between different religious groups in the world, that's very unfortunate. It's something that's very sad to see. So we must be careful always to promote religious harmony and not create kind of hostile feelings between people of different religious groups. So that's kind of the second, third point. Then sort of the fourth point, His Holiness was saying, oh yeah, so for all of us from Buddhist heritage, we recite the Heart Sutra. And then His Holiness made this point, which he often makes, which is how, well, His Holiness uses this point in different ways. Sometimes he uses it to show how the Tibetan translations of the Buddha's word are superior to the Chinese ones, the Chinese translations. And sometimes he uses it to show more that the Heart Sutra is teaching not only the selflessness of persons, but also the selflessness of phenomena. So I'll share with you now my screen and show you this quotation that His Holiness gave from the Heart Sutra. So here is this one. And so this is right, there's actually three, I didn't get the third. There's three quotations from His Holiness, from the Heart Sutra that His Holiness usually quotes. So this is the first, where it says, and behold and beheld. So this is it starts off with, talking about the Buddha meditating on emptiness, and then also Avalokiteshvara meditating on emptiness, right at the beginning of the Heart Sutra. So that point says, and beheld, so this is Avalokiteshvara, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Right? So in Tibetan, there's also this word layang. Pumpo ngapo, so 5 aggregates, dera layang, ranshiki tomba namba dao. So then when it says also there, what is it talking about? If I tell you, oh, I also like cheese, then you'll be wondering, well, like, in addition to what? If you don't tell something else, then also doesn't make sense, right? There has to be 2 things. So here it just says, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So the question comes, well, okay, so the 5 aggregates are empty of inherent nature, and also what? So His Holiness is saying that also refers to the person. Not only is the person empty of inherent nature, but the basis of imputation of the person, the 5 aggregates, that also is empty of inherent nature. So in the Heart Sutra, it never says the person is empty of inherent nature. It never says that explicitly, which is kind of odd, right? But it does say also, right? It says the basis of imputation of the person, the 5 aggregates, are also empty of inherent nature. So His Holiness is saying that also refers to the person. So he's saying, and His Holiness is making the point that in the Chinese translation, that word also is not there. In this case, nor in the following case, where it says this one. So this is where actually, first the Buddha is meditating on emptiness. Then it describes Avalokiteshvara meditating emptiness. Then Shariputra asked Avalokiteshvara, if someone wants to, follow the Bodhisattva path, how do they practice? And then in reply, so most of the Heart Sutra, the main part of the Heart Sutra is Avalokiteshvara's reply to Shariputra. So at the very beginning of Avalokiteshvara's reply to Shariputra, then he says this. Basically, a bodhisattva, I should have put a dot there. A bodhisattva should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So again, you would have heard His Holiness saying this word kyang in Tibetan. So it means also. So again, it just says the same thing. So basically, His Holiness is making the point that the Heart Sutra teaches, so by having this word kyang, then it teaches both the selflessness of persons, or emptiness of person, and the emptiness of phenomena, or selflessness of phenomena. But that in the Chinese translation, that word is not there. There's no particle meaning also or kyang in the Chinese. And so His Holiness was telling them at the end, and then he was asking, is it there in the Vietnamese? But nobody answered. And then His Holiness was saying in the Chinese, if you can just put that particle in, it would be very good, right? So then His Holiness was saying he researched in the Sanskrit, it is there. It's not just the Tibetans made it up. It's there in the Sanskrit. But then, Venerable Dekyong at the Root Institute, she told me, well, because also this word also, as well, it comes up in the form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness also is not other than form. There's an also there as well, but that one's a different meaning. That's not this. But Venerable Dekyong was saying kind of like, but in the Chinese also is there. I don't know why His Holiness harps on this again and again. Right? So I don't know. I don't know about the Chinese, but yeah. Maybe if any of you know, you can mention when we discuss later on. Okay. So then His Holiness was going on to make this point, some points about the first turning, the second turning, and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. So he was saying in relation to this, that in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, then the Buddha taught the selflessness of persons, but not that the person is empty of inherent existence. I'll bring it back to me. Not that the person is empty of inherent existence, but that the person is empty. It's called the selflessness of persons. There's 2. There's a coarse selflessness of persons and a subtle selflessness of persons, right? So the subtle selflessness of persons is what we usually talk about, the person being empty of inherent existence, right? That's asserted by the middle way consequentialist school, right? But this coarse selflessness of persons, which is asserted by the Sutra school on up, everybody else accepts it basically, So the Sutra school, the course selflessness of persons is what's taught in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, right? In the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha teaches that everything is inherently existent. Everything exists from its own side. Everything exists by the force of its own characteristics, right? It's totally opposite to the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. But persons are empty of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, right? So the course selflessness of persons is that the person is empty of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So what that means basically is that, well, the idea of what's being negated there is a person who is like a king who rules over the ministers, right? So for a person to be a king, it depends upon them having ministers, right? But then they're not any of the ministers, and they can but they can't really be the king without the support of those ministers, and yet they control. So just imagine, I mean, I don't know, it's not always the case, but they control what, and they order those ministers around. They control what they do. So the idea is like that, then we have a sense that we're dependent upon our aggregates. We cannot exist separate from them, right? We know we cannot exist something separate from, independent from our body and mind. We depend upon our body and mind, but we're not our body and we're not our mind, and yet we control our body and mind. So, but by controlling our body and mind, we have a separate substance, right? It's not just like, we're not just that we're merely imputed upon the body and mind, as is the case according to the consequentialist school, but rather there's a sense that we have a substantial existence. We are something that really exists, and we exist from our own side. We're not just merely imputed, but that we exist in dependence upon our body and mind, and yet we're not dependent upon them such that we can control them. We can control them like a ruler controls his subjects. So something like that. So the negation of that kind of person, oftentimes in order to help understand this, it's suggested to imagine you could change your body with someone else's body. Now, do you have a feeling like that you could exchange your body with someone else's? Say you're really sick and someone else is healthy, and you just think, oh, if I could just have their body, and they can have my sick body. I don't know. So then, but you have a sense that, you know, you're separate from your body, right? But that we control our body, and we're not our mind, but we control our mind. And that person that controls our body and mind has a separate substantial existence, right? So the negation of that is the coarse selflessness of persons. And that's what the Buddha taught in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, right? And then in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught a more subtle selflessness of a person, and as well the Buddha taught a selflessness of all phenomena, that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. So that's what the Heart Sutra is teaching. Yeah. So the Heart Sutra belongs to the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, right? All the Perfection of Wisdom sutras belong to the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. Okay, so then kind of a fourth main point, or I'm not sure I'm on fourth or fifth, His Holiness moved on to, is that kind of, again, it's easier to practice the religion of your parents. It goes back to, and then he kind of compares the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition, especially of Nalanda, that the Pali tradition relies more on faith, whereas the Sanskrit tradition of Nalanda appeals more to logic and reason and analysis. And then His Holiness made this very strong point, which he's been making the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, that we should no longer use the labels Mahayana and Hinayana, because it's derogatory for those who follow the Pali tradition, basically. So because, yeah, the Mahayana and Hinayana, those labels imply a kind of superiority and inferiority, which just creates discord among the different traditions. So there's no need to do that. So we should use terms that are respectful to both traditions. So the best way to do that is to use the terms the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition, right? So the Pali tradition refers to, you know, those countries who primarily follow the Buddhist teachings as given in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, right? So all the sutras that belong to the first turning of the wheel of Dharma belong to the Pali canon, and then the sutras belonging to the second and third turning of the wheel of Dharma belong to the Sanskrit canon. And then His Holiness goes on to the next point, is about the truth of cessation. And the possibility, and thereby the possibility of achieving liberation from samsara and full enlightenment. So His Holiness emphasized the importance of establishing the possibility of full cessation. And then he gave this quotation. His Holiness gave two quotations here, so I'll stick to my little cheat sheet again. So the first one is from Maitreya's Sublime Continuum. It's this one. It says the perfect Buddha. So this is a translation which I'm not really fully satisfied with. It's by a woman named Rosemary Fuchs. She's a student of, I forget, in the Kagyu tradition. I mean, generally it's okay, but it could be better. Anyway, it says the perfect Buddhakaya is all-embracing. Here, all-embracing means more like it's spread out everywhere. It exists everywhere. The perfect Buddhakaya. So perfect here also means like the complete. That means like the body of a fully enlightened Buddha. And it's probably referring to the mind, the Buddha's mind more. But I mean, wherever the Buddha's mind is, the Buddha's form is as well. So it refers to all the Buddha's bodies, you could kind of say. So the complete Buddha's body is everywhere, right? Is all embracing. It pervades all space. And I mean, actually, yeah, anyway, I'll come back. Suchness cannot be differentiated. It means suchness, the emptiness of inherent existence, is the same everywhere. And all beings have disposition. So here the disposition means basically they have the Buddha lineage. Thus, they always have Buddha nature, right? So the thus here means that this is the conclusion, and these first three lines each give a reason. So actually in the Tibetan, it's much more clear. It says basically, because the complete Buddha's body is everywhere, is spread out everywhere, because suchness, or which means emptiness of inherent existence, is universal. It cannot be differentiated. It exists in all places. And because all beings have the lineage of the Buddhas, thereby all beings have Buddha nature. It's basically what it means. So it's establishing Buddha nature. So yeah, I don't have time. If you want, maybe question and answer, we can come back if you want. I don't have time to explain it all now. But basically, that explains the Buddha nature. And then His Holiness also gave these two lines, which I've been searching for a couple hours and asking all my classmates and all my friends who might know. And I found each of these lines separately from two different texts. So I haven't found this quote, but this quote His Holiness uses a lot. So I know you're looking at the Tibetan being like, well, what does it mean? And so that's why the 3 question marks are there. No, basically it means drima means obscurations or taints. Drima wani loborwa. Loborwa means adventitious, right? So it means all the stains on our mind, all the taints on our mind, all the afflictive emotions and the imprints of the afflictive emotions that exist in our mind stream are all adventitious, right? They're just it's a temporary state. They're not permanently fixed in the nature of our mind. And then yonten ranjin nidenshir. And then so yonten means qualities, and ranjin means naturally, and denshir means because we possess. So it means because we naturally possess all qualities. So of course we don't actually possess all qualities, do we? But it means we have the potential to possess every quality to its perfection, right? We have the potential to possess all qualities, and that potential is of the nature of our mind. All the taints that we have, our anger, attachment, and our disposition to those are all adventitious stains on our mind, right? So the potential to perfect all positive qualities is of the nature of our mind, and the stains are all just adventitious. So it's a very kind of hopeful perspective. So yeah, that the second line is from the Sublime Continuum, the same text. The first line seems to be from the 2nd chapter of the commentary on valid cognition by Dharmakirti. Okay, so His Holiness is making the point that we all have Buddha nature, basically. that we all have the potential to become fully enlightened Buddhas, and that all the afflictive emotions we experience, because they're all rooted and based in a fundamental misunderstanding, fundamental wrong concept, ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, and thereby by generating the wisdom of emptiness, we can eliminate that ignorance, grasping at inherent existence. And because all the afflictive emotions and the imprints of those are all based on, they all have grown out of, arise out of that ignorance. And just like when you cut the root of a tree, all the leaves and the branches and the flowers also die. Then when you totally eliminate that ignorance, grasping at truly existent self from the root, then all the afflictive emotions and suffering that are products of that, they also cease to exist gradually. So he's saying, and then His Holiness quotes this from this other line from the Heart Sutra. He's saying all the Buddhas of the past have relied on wisdom realizing emptiness to achieve full enlightenment, to perfect all positive qualities. All the Buddhas of the past, all the Buddhas of the present, all the Buddhas of the future, whoever will come, they all rely on the perfection of wisdom to be free from suffering and achieve full enlightenment. So we have to do the same. So this is from the Heart Sutra, towards the end of the Heart Sutra. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times, the past, present, and future, also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. And then His Holiness is saying basically, so we have to too. So we have to make effort. And this is kind of the essential teaching of, all the there's, from the 300 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra down to the shortest Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, the letter A. Right? They all teach this. Yeah. Then His Holiness, I'll kind of skip through a little bit. Okay, so His Holiness gave another nice overview of the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma again. His Holiness is making a strong point of this, because this is a way, looking at what's taught in the three different turnings of the wheel of Dharma is a nice way to get a broad overview of the entirety of Buddhist teachings, and to kind of, in a simple way, get in mind, like, what was the Buddha doing by teaching over 40 years, all these different sutras to different people at different times? What is the broad kind of framework for those teachings, and what was the Buddha kind of getting at, in a broad way? What was the Buddha trying to lead us towards? What was the intention of all the teachings? So here His Holiness says that on the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, because that's the basis for all practice. He taught the Four Noble Truths, and especially he emphasized practicing pure morality. He taught the Eightfold Noble Path, and he taught the coarse selflessness of persons. So the Four Noble Truths mainly is the broad outline for all of the Buddhist teachings, right? And then, and he emphasized especially the truth of suffering and the truth of causes of suffering, right? The causes of suffering being immorality, being engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions, right? And then in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom, the Buddha emphasized the truth of cessation and goes more deeply into that. What is the real deepest source, deepest root of all suffering and all our afflictive emotions? It's not just the coarse selflessness of persons. It's the subtle selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. It means the grasping at inherent existence of ourself as a person, and grasping at the inherent existence of all phenomena. That is really the deep root of all suffering. And thereby, because it's a misconception, it's a wrong view, then by understanding the truth of interdependence, that all phenomena are dependently arising phenomena, all phenomena exist specifically in dependence upon imputation by concepts, mere imputation by name and by concepts. By realizing that wisdom of interdependence, then we can totally eliminate the grasping at inherent existence, and thereby it's possible to achieve cessation of the two kinds of afflictions, the two kinds of obscurations, afflictive obscurations and knowledge obscurations. And then in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, so it's in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma that the Buddha teaches about Buddha nature, about how we all have the potential for full enlightenment. And the basis for that is primarily the purity of our mind. The purity of our mind. So it's in the third tenet of the Wheel of the Dharma that the Buddha teaches the mind-only view of the world. And specifically, the Buddha teaches that, more specifically, that the nature of our mind is clear light, right? The nature of our mind is that which is merely, what is it? Clear and knowing, or luminous and knowing, right? That which is merely clear and knowing, or luminous and knowing. The first word, sel, means it can mean luminous or it can mean clear, both. And there's different interpretations of what that means. But one, so in the conventional way, looking at it as the conventional nature of the mind, then the mind, its nature is, it's not in the nature of any particular thought or concept or any particular experience, but anything that exists can appear to the mind, just like a mirror, or just like any visible form can be reflected in a mirror, or just like any object can move through the space of the sky, or just like, you know, whatever pollutants you put into water can always be separated out from the water. The pure nature of the water always remains. Like that, whatever afflictive emotions or ignorance or, you know, suffering experiences we have, none of them are in the nature of the mind. They're all transient. They can all be separated from our experience. And but the clear, luminous, and clear nature of the mind's knowing, the mind's being aware, is always there. That's the nature of the mind. So that's the conventional nature. And then the ultimate nature of the mind, of course, is that it's empty of inherent existence. So His Holiness is saying, in the third turning of the Wheel of Dharma, then the Buddha teaches this clear light nature of the mind, this nature of the mind to be luminous and pure. And then that's been there from beginningless time. It's there now. It will always be there no matter what happens. It's not that anybody ever gave it to us, or we have to create it. We have to achieve it. It's there. So that, because of course the mind is the subject which knows, and it knows objects, right? So then His Holiness went back here and said, in the second turning of the Wheel of Dharma, then the Buddha taught, you know, that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. So that can be thought of as the clear light nature of objects, right? So you have the clear light nature of the subject, the mind, which knows, and then you have the clear light nature of the objects, the things that are experienced and the things that are known. So the clear light nature of objects is their emptiness of inherent existence. The clear light nature of the mind is that its nature is pure from the very beginning, and all obscurations are merely adventitious. So then looking at these two clear light natures of the object and subject, then this leads us into Tantra, right? So really the base from which Tantra is taught is the third turning of the Wheel of Dharma. Because I mean, you think about, well, mainly what do we have to do to be free from samsara and then become fully enlightened, is we have to purify obscurations, right? So by purifying our afflictive obscurations, we achieve liberation from samsara. By purifying our knowledge obscurations, we achieve the state of omniscience and full enlightenment. So what is the method, the main method to abandon all obscurations in both cases? Is by meditating on emptiness, right? So then, and especially the emptiness of inherent existence, right? So then in Sutra and Tantra, we both have, what's the difference between Sutra and Tantra? In both of them, the main method to eliminate obscurations is meditation on emptiness of inherent existence. And the emptiness that's meditated on Sutra, emptiness meditated on in Tantra is the same. So then what's the difference? The difference is in the quality of the mind meditating on emptiness, right? In the Sutra school, there's no real discussion of different levels of coarseness and subtlety of different levels of mind, right? That some levels of mind are more coarse and some levels of mind are more subtle. There's no description of that. Whereas in Tantra, there is very detailed description of coarse and more subtle levels of mind. And there's a recognition that, you know, we have to access and use the very most subtle level of mind that we can, and use that to meditate on emptiness in order to abandon the most subtle obscurations and obscurations, right? So then thereby it's this third turn of the wheel of Dharma that teaches more about the nature of the mind. That leads then into the explanation of Tantra, where Tantra has much more detailed and deep explanations about the nature of the mind and different levels of subtlety of the mind, and how to use that to abandon the most subtle levels of obscurations, right? So then His Holiness went on to a different point about the importance of gaining a full understanding of the Buddhist teachings by becoming familiar with the main intent of all of the great texts, and that among those, the main thing to study is the text by Nagarjuna and his spiritual sons, such as Chandakirti, Buddhapalita, Aryadeva, Shantideva, and so forth. And that the clearest presentation of Nagarjuna is in Entering the Middle Way by Chandakirti. So it's very important to study that. So Entering the Middle Way, you know, the main text by Nagarjuna is the fundamental wisdom, root wisdom. And then the most clear commentary on that is Entering the Middle Way by Chandakirti. And His Holiness is saying he reads that text, both Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, Chandakirti's Entering the Middle Way, and then Chandakirti's auto commentary on Entering the Middle Way. That His Holiness reads those texts again and again and again, and that we should do likewise. And then His Holiness emphasized, you know, this threefold process of hearing or study, contemplation, and meditation. And that without, you know, in order to have good meditation, we need to have good contemplation first. In order to have good contemplation, we need to study first, right? And that without, you know, properly studying, properly listening to Dharma teachings, reading texts, then trying to just meditate straight away, that we're like a person with no hands or no fingers who's trying to climb up a mountain. It just doesn't work. There's a Tibetan saying to that effect. And then His Holiness emphasized that even someone like Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo, we might generally think of as kind of a yogi, he's also a great scholar. And as evidence of that, His Holiness said that he's seen a commentary by Thokme Sangpo on the Sublime Continuum by Maitreya. So thereby we can know that Thokme Sangpo is also very well learned. Also, I can just say in Geshe Studies introduction to the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas, he told a story about when Thokme Sangpo was in his 30s and talked about him. You know, there's a famous story where Thokme Sangpo used to give food and kind of some donations to a beggar who lived on the street outside the monastery where he lived in Tibet. And one day he saw the beggar wasn't there, so Thokme Sangpo went searching for him, and he found the beggar kind of had hidden himself away in sort of a little a kind of nook in some rocks, a little further away from the monastery and further away from where people live. And he asked him, "Why are you there?" And the beggar said, "Because I'm so dirty and I'm so disgusting that, you know, people are kind of disgusted when they see me. They abhor meeting me or seeing me. So I've hidden myself away here." And then Thokme Sangpo felt so sorry for him. He took the beggar to his room, he gave him good food and clean clothes, and then he took the beggar's coat, and then he saw that the coat the beggar was wearing was full of lice. And Thokme Sangpo thought, if I just throw the coat away, all these lice will die. So I'll wear the coat myself in order that they can drink my blood, that they can live off my body. So and then by doing that, after some time, he became really, really sick. And then some of his classmates came to see him, and they said, you know, if you're sick like this, you can't serve the Dharma and serve sentient beings. So you should just forget about the lice and throw the coat away. But Thokme Sangpo said, you know, but from life to life to life, I've used my body to harm other sentient beings. Now, in this life, I'm going to use my body to benefit other sentient beings. And so he kept wearing the coat, but it said, and then here Lama's over, Geshe Studies didn't say, but Lama's over adds here that by the force of Thokme Sangpo's altruistic concern for the lice, by the force of his compassion, then the lice, they didn't eat him anymore. They didn't bite him anymore. So then after 17 days, it said all the lice died off naturally. They didn't reproduce and they didn't keep biting him. And then he got better. But so the point was that in Geshe Studies introduction, he was saying, oh, during that time when he was sick, Thokme Sangpo was missing class, right? He was in his 30s and he was still going to class, right? So from that, I kind of took away, because I'm in my late 40s and I'm still going to class too. Sometimes I think, what am I doing? But from that, we can take away that, Thokme Sangpo, even, we don't usually think that, usually if you're studying into your mid 30s, either you're doing like a really good PhD or you're just kind of like a dropout, basically, right? So we can take away that Thokme Sangpo studied for a long time. Yeah. So, okay. So now we come basically to, that's pretty much His Holiness preliminary comments. Now we come to the verses that His Holiness read. So I'll just, again, share my screen and we'll read through the verses. Oops, I didn't open up. One minute. I forgot to open up. Oh. Okay. Let's see. Do this. I forgot to open up 37 practices of Bodhisattvas on my computer, so I'll do that now. Okay, and now I'll share it with you. There we go. So I think His Holiness stopped at about verse 24. No, here it is. Okay, I marked it. So in this version, it's verse 20. I don't know. His Holiness got up to, I think, verse 22 or 23 yesterday. I'm not sure which, but we'll read from verse 22 anyway. Whatever appears, oh yeah, we discussed verse 22. So verse 23. When you encounter attractive objects, though they seem beautiful, like a rainbow in summer, don't regard them as real and give up attachment. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So just like a rainbow, in the summer, you see it in the sky. When we're kids, we think, oh, if we walk far enough, eventually we'll reach the base of the rainbow and then we can find a pot of gold or climb up it, slide down it and stuff. But as far as you walk, you'll never find the rainbow, right? It's just kind of, it's intangible. So like that, anything that exists, when we look for the actual thing, we can't find it. We just find basis of imputation. And then we look for the basis of imputation, we just find another basis of imputation. There's no bottom to it. Okay, then 24. All forms of suffering are like a child's death in a dream. Holding illusory appearances to be true makes you weary, right? So imagine you're having a dream, and in the dream your child dies, how distraught you are. When you wake up and realize it's just a dream, all that disturbance of your mind goes away. So it's because we hold on to things as to be truly existent that we disturb our own minds. Once we realize they're all just illusions, they're things that are merely imputed by concepts. They don't have any more substantial existence than that. Then, nothing bothers us anymore. Therefore, when you meet with disagreeable circumstances, see them as illusory. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. And 25, when those who want enlightenment must give even their body, there's no need to mention external things. Therefore, without hope for return or any fruition, give generously. So from here, Thokme Sangpo goes through the 6 perfections. So here is the perfection of generosity, saying, yeah, if the enlightened ones give away even their body, then there's no mention they give away other things, their possessions and their virtues. So be like them, basically, and give away whatever you have without any hope for something, in return, right? So without any selfish motivation. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. And then 26, without ethics, you cannot accomplish your own well-being. So wanting to accomplish others is laughable. Therefore, without worldly aspirations, safeguard your ethical discipline. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas, right? So without practicing pure morality, at least the morality of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth, then one, and by doing the opposite of that, right? By engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions, we create the causes of suffering. So of course, by doing that, we cannot achieve our own ends, right? So then achieving the ends of others, the aims of others, is just a joke, right? So if in order to achieve our own well-being, we have to practice the pure morality of not harming others, at least. And then if we want to achieve the welfare of others, there's no question we have to have pure morality, right? Therefore, without worldly aspirations, right? So without craving the selfish happiness of this life, then safeguard your ethical discipline. So the ethical discipline of course, the patimoksha, what do you say? The discipline of solitary liberation, I think, individual liberation, bodhisattva, and then if you have tantric vows, of course. Then 27 is patience. To bodhisattvas who want a wealth of virtue, those who harm are like a precious treasure. Therefore, towards all, cultivate patience without hostility. This is the practices of bodhisattvas. So here His Holiness said, which I haven't heard before, that the main way that bodhisattvas, I think I understood His Holiness to say this, the main way that bodhisattvas accumulate merit is by practicing patience, which is interesting. And then His Holiness, So one of the main ways, one of the main practices of bodhisattvas is patience. I think maybe it's below, His Holiness mentioned from Shantideva's Bodhisattva's way of life, that if you can't, I think he mentioned below. I'll mention it below. So bodhisattva, who wants a wealth of virtue. So that's why it says that. A bodhisattva who wants a wealth of virtue. So if you want to accumulate a wealth of virtue, because remember also, whenever we become angry, we destroy a huge amount of our accumulation of merit, right? That's one of the biggest deficits, drawbacks of anger, is we destroy merit that we've accumulated over a long, long time. And it sets us back on the path. Every time we become angry, it's like it sets us back to, from the point, like if we've reached the path of accumulation and we're about to achieve the path of preparation with just a little more effort, then we become really angry at someone, it'll cause us to have to, take rebirth again many times, or have to practice for many more hundreds of years before we achieve the next kind of level of realization. So even for us who are just kind of totally beginners, every time we become angry, it really sets us back in our practice. So it's interesting. I mean, try to check that in your own experience to see if that seems true. But bodhisattvas who want a wealth of virtue, so they protect their virtue by not being angry, by practicing patience. And then for them, those who harm them are like a precious treasure, because it gives them opportunity to practice patience. Therefore, towards all cultivate patience without hostility. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Then 28, seeing even hearer and solitary realizers who accomplish only their own good, strive as if to put out a fire on their head, right? So imagine suddenly, I mean, I don't have much hair, but for you who have a lot of hair, imagine suddenly it burst into flame. Like you wouldn't be like, oh, I'll go have a drink of water, or maybe first I'll see if I have any messages on, WhatsApp. No, you wouldn't do that. You would be like, oh my God, I have to put out the fire. That would be the first thing you do without thinking of anything else, right? So if even those practicing the Pali tradition, the hearers and solitary realizers, they strive as if to put out a fire on their own head for the sake of all beings. So for us, for bodhisattvas, or those who aspire to follow the bodhisattva path, who aspire to work for the welfare of all sentient beings, it's as if all sentient beings have a fire on their head, right? For the sake of all sentient beings, make enthusiastic effort, the source of all good qualities. This is a practice of bodhisattvas. And 29, understanding that disturbing emotions are destroyed by special insight with calm abiding. So special insight means wisdom realizing emptiness that's been conjoined with calm abiding. Cultivate concentration, which surpasses the four formless absorptions. Right, so the four formless absorptions are the four most subtle levels of concentration, more stable, most clear levels of concentration within samsara, right? So then by generating a calm abiding focused on emptiness, we generate even more subtle, more clear more stable level of concentration that transcends samsara. Right, so this is a practice of bodhisattvas. And here, His Holiness quoted from, I think, Entering the Middle Way. Well, His Holiness gave this quote by Chandrakirti early on in the talk again today. He gave it yesterday as well. So yeah, you can read it later on. And then when His Holiness spoke about hearing, contemplation, and meditation, he just briefly mentioned this verse, Tsongkhapa, which he also mentioned yesterday. First, I sought out often extensive learning. Then all teachings dawned as trainings. Finally, I practiced all day and night, completely dedicated to the spread of the teaching. So these two verses are ones that His Holiness quotes very often. But here in relation to the commentary on this special insight and calm abiding, His Holiness quoted this verse from Entering the Middle Way. Seeing with their wisdom that all afflictions and all faults stem from the identity, view, grasping, that's a strange translation. This is Thupten Jinpa's translation. Stem from the identity view, grasping at the perishable collection. I'm gonna have to explain that. And knowing that the self is the focus of this identity view, the yogi engages in the negation of selfhood. Oh my God. All right. Seeing that, okay, so basically it's this, seeing with their wisdom. So yogis who have realized emptiness directly, so those on the path of seeing and above, right? Those who've realized emptiness directly with their wisdom's eye, they see that all the afflictive emotions and all the suffering, the faults of the afflictive emotions, those all stem from the identity view. This is jigda. Usually it's translated as jigda or jigdingidawa, the worldly view or view of the world, jigda. Or the view of the, I think Lama Zopa Rinpoche translated as the view of the perishing aggregates, something like that. But yeah, it's a little difficult to translate. But basically it means grasping at inherent existence. That's good. So they stem from the view grasping at inherent existence of persons mainly. And that view, it grasps at the perishable collection. So the jigda, the perishable collection means our five aggregates, right? Our five aggregates are impermanent. They're changing moment by moment. Thereby they're perishable, right? They're a collection of aggregates, which is actually, in fact, it's changing moment by moment. Thereby, in fact, it's dependent arising. But we observe our aggregates, we grasp at their being, and we impute a person, and then we grasp at that person as being inherently existent, right? So that's just what it's talking about. So that is the source of all the afflictive emotions. That's all it's saying. So these yogis see that, and thereby they see that the five aggregates is the object grasped at by, is the object observed and then grasped at as inherently existent by ignorance. And then knowing that that self is the focus of this wrong view, the yogi engages in the negation of self. It means the yogi meditates on emptiness. It's not that complicated, actually, it's just strange words. All right, where were we? Yeah. All right, so that's verse 29. But in verse 30, since the five perfections without wisdom cannot bring perfect enlightenment, along with skillful means, cultivate with the wisdom which does not conceive of the three spheres as real. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So you see again, the negation, the qualifier, the object of negation as real is totally added by the translator. That's not in the Tibetan. So again here, it kind of appears that Thokme Sangpo is not holding the view of Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna, but he's holding like a mind-only school view, perhaps. Anyway, okay. His Holiness didn't make much comment on these verses. He read through them quite quickly. So, verse 31, if you do not examine your own errors, you may look like a practitioner, but not act as one. Therefore, always examining your own errors, rid yourself of them. This is the practice of Bodhisattva. So errors means your own faults, your arrogant pride, especially if you become very learned, very, you received a lot of teachings, you've studied a lot, you know a lot, you're teaching different places, and you're kind of senior. There's a danger of becoming arrogant and proud, and not practicing what you're teaching others. So here His Holiness told a story about Latsu Rinpoche giving him this text, and just mentioned this is really true, isn't it, this advice. We have to be careful that we actually practice what we claim to practice, that we are what we claim to be and not something more. Then 32, if through the influence of disturbing emotions, you point out the faults of another bodhisattva, you yourself are diminished. So don't mention the faults of those who have generated the great vehicle view. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So this is something Shantideva also teaches, and in Shantideva's, Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo's commentary on the verse to this effect by Shantideva, Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo points out that we don't know who's a bodhisattva, right? Bodhisattvas appear in all different forms, as humans, as animals. Among humans, they can appear as men, women, black, white. They can appear as learned and educated, subdued, kind people. They can appear as we have no idea what other people are, who's a bodhisattva and who's not. Therefore, we should treat everyone as if they're a bodhisattva and not belittle, not demean, not mistreat or disrespect anyone. Then 35, reward and respect cause us to quarrel and make hearing, thinking, and meditation decline. For this reason, give up attachment to households of friends, relations, and benefactors. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. 34, harsh words disturb the minds of others and cause deterioration in a bodhisattva's conduct. Therefore, give up harsh words, which are unpleasant to others. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So here His Holiness just mentioned that also, like Shantideva teaches in Bodhisattva's way of life, if we get angry at another person, and we think if we're going to speak, we're not going to be able to help ourselves from saying something that's belittling and disturbing to that person, then it's better just to hold our tongue, just remain silent, and kind of, walk away. But don't speak harsh words to others, because we create negative karma, and also it harms others. It disturbs their minds, it destroys their relationships, and so forth. Then 35, habitual disturbing emotions are hard to stop through concentration, through counteractions. Armed with antidotes, the guards of mindfulness and mental alertness destroy disturbing emotions like attachment at once, as soon as they arise. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Earlier in this, His Holiness talk this morning, he made this distinction between, and he was asking Yangten Rinpoche for the term, but Yangten Rinpoche couldn't pull up the term that His Holiness wanted. I'm not sure what it is, but His Holiness was making this distinction between antidotes, which they are a remedy for specific afflictive emotions, like contentment and having few wants is a remedy for attachment, but not a remedy for anger. Or like patience and loving kindness is a remedy for anger, but not a remedy for arrogant pride necessarily. Whereas the wisdom realizing emptiness is an antidote or a remedy for all the afflictive emotions, right? So there's some antidotes that are remedies only for specific afflictive emotions. And then there's other antidotes like wisdom realizing emptiness that are remedy for all the afflictive emotions. So that's not specifically talked about here, but it kind of alludes to that. Then verse 36, in brief, whatever you are doing, ask yourself, what's the state of my mind? With constant mindfulness and mental alertness, accomplish others' good. This is the practice of bodhisattva. So this is really the kind of summary of the entire text right here. In brief, whatever you're doing, ask yourself, what's the state of my mind? With constant mindfulness and mental alertness, accomplish others' good, others' welfare. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. And then I think maybe His Holiness read this one more verse, 37. We stop about here though. To remove the suffering of limitless beings, understanding the purity of the three spheres, dedicate the virtue for making such effort to enlightenment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Okay, and then His Holiness moved to the three principal aspects of the path. by Lama Tsongkhapa, which I also didn't open up on my computer yet. So just 1 second. Oh, here it is. Oh, okay. All right, here we are. So I'm using, there's 2 translations I put in the chat and that we uploaded to the Google Drive. There's one translation by Thupten Jinpa, and then there's this translation by Lama Zopa Rinpoche and some helpers. But I mean, I'm using this translation because it gives the headings for each section, and His Holiness mentioned these headings. So the first is expressing homage. I bow down to my perfect gurus. Then the second, then the first full verse is the promise to compose the text. And His Holiness explained, which I've never heard before, that within this verse is a kind of an outline for the whole text. It explains the 3 principal aspects. The essential meaning of the Victorious One's teachings refers to renunciation. The path praised, which is emphasized in the first turning of the Wheel of Dharma. The path praised by all the holy Victorious Ones and their sons, and their children, actually, you can translate, means the Bodhisattvas. So the path praised by all the Buddhas, the holy Victorious Ones, and the Bodhisattvas is, of course, the Bodhisattva path, of which the main characteristic of is bodhicitta. So the second line teaches bodhicitta, and then the third line, the gateway of the fortunate one's desiring liberation is wisdom realizing emptiness. So let's explain like that, I think. This I shall try to explain as much as I can. So that's the promise to compose is maybe in that 4th line. And then second verse, persuading the hearers to listen, the audience to listen. Says, those who are not attached to the pleasures of circling in samsara, who strive to make freedoms and endowments meaningful, who entrust themselves to the path pleasing the victorious ones, you fortunate ones, listen with a calm mind. Yeah, listen with a calm mind. Okay. I'm not sure. His Holiness made some comment there, but I didn't really understand it. So then renunciation. His Holiness just taught the few verses here on just the first 2 verses on renunciation. The purpose of generating renunciation. Without the complete intention definitely to be free from circling, there's no way to pacify attachment seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling, means the ocean of samsara. Also, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. So basically it's saying, without renunciation, you'll never be free from samsara. You'll again and again and again take rebirth in samsara. Again and again, because you won't pacify craving, you'll crave for the, worldly pleasures, especially the sense pleasures and arrogant, selfish, pleasures in samsara, and then you'll suffer endlessly. So therefore we need to seek renunciation. And then how to generate renunciation, this is 2 verses. Freedoms and endowments are difficult to find. So this is precious human rebirth, it's difficult to find. And life has no time to spare. It means life is very short and it's quickly coming to an end, right? By gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life are reversed. So it means attachment to the pleasures of just this life, the selfish pleasures of just this life are reversed by thinking about our good fortune, this fortune of human rebirth, and how this opportunity won't last long. That death is quickly approaching. Then by thinking over and over, so actually in the Tibetan, that's just 2 lines. In the English here, they made it into 4 lines. And then these 4 lines are also just 2 lines in Tibetan. So in Tibetan, this is 1 verse, these 2 verses here. By thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying. So this is the law of cause and effect, is unmistaken, it's unbetraying. It's a natural law that's the way it happens. Doesn't matter what you think about it. By thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence. So thinking about the drawbacks of samsara. By thinking about those 2 things, right? The law of cause and effect and all the faults of samsara, then attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. So this verse is an amazing verse, right? In Tibetan, it's just one verse. It summarizes both basically the small scope and the middle scope in 4 lines, right? It's one to memorize and repeat to yourself. It's again and again and again. Freedoms and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to waste. By becoming familiar with this, by meditating on it again and again, attachment to this life is reversed. By thinking over and over again about karma, the law of cause and effect, that actions and their effects are unbetraying, unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence as a whole, attraction to the appearances of future lives is also reversed. So His Holiness stopped here, but His Holiness, the comment he made here was in this. So this is the main contemplation to generate renunciation. But here His Holiness said that when he contemplates these verses, every day, His Holiness recites his whole prayer every day. He said many times. But when he contemplates this verse on how to generate renunciation, he also uses these verses, these 2 verses from the method for generating bodhicitta, and applies them to himself. He said, so this verse, swept away by the current of the 4 powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma, or tight knots of karma, so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly born in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the 3 sufferings. Thinking that, so here it says all mothers are in such a condition. As Holiness said, he replaces these words, thinking that I am in such a condition, right? So to generate renunciation, think about I'm in this condition, myself. Then generate the supreme mind of renunciation, right? So and then His Holiness just commented a little bit on each of these lines. But this is a very, it's a very vivid analogy, very powerful analogy. So very powerful way to generate for today from my side. So now if you have any questions, I can try to answer your questions. You can raise your virtual hand or wave your hand in front of the screen. You have a question, Maya? Okay. I'm trying to unmute you. Oh, no, okay. Hold on.
Okay. Now you can hear me?
You can.
Yeah, okay. So I have a question actually. This is something that I'm sort of like debating regarding to these bodhisattvas. 35 verses. Like, I give you the background for it, right? Right now, there is a lot of demonstration going on against my prime minister, right? And there is a debate within the Buddhist, sort of like there is a Facebook page of this Buddhist Israeli community, whatever. And some people say that we should go and demonstrate, and some people say that we shouldn't do it, and how you call yourself Buddhist if you're going to demonstrate, all of this. And I've always been in a way pro demonstration. I think for me it's really hard to see that there is something that I can do within the frame of things that I can do, and to not do that, and there was I can even go to extreme, right? There was this case now in Israel, was in the news, that this girl was violated, and there were some people, guys, that didn't took place. It was by a few guys, and they took place in the act itself, but they were standing aside and looking at it. No one said anything. No one stopped it. And I feel like we have a responsibility when we see things that are happening that are not okay, to say something.
Your internet connection froze. I feel like.
Oh, sorry. Were you able to understand what I was saying?
I think it's your internet, Venerable. It's a bit sketchy because from here I could hear the whole thing.
And then maybe it's my connection. Maya, when you were saying, I feel like, It froze.
Oh, I feel like when there is something that is happening and is not okay, and I'm able to do something about it within, trying to keep my mind out of anger, but just standing from the side and not doing anything, I had a teacher and she said, like, at the end, everything is karma. If you're able to do something and you don't do it, it's also karma.
Yeah, I mean, you're creating karma. I mean, it's definitely not okay to say, well, you see somebody else suffering and you can do something about it and you don't, saying it's their karma. That's totally wrong.
No, but also, because I don't want to be, engaging in something that could make anger arise or something like that. Or like, the debate that there is right now is that we are acting against the prime minister. If you go to a demonstration, you go against him.
Yeah, but I think, in Buddhism, the main thing is always the motivation, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then, of course, you have to balance, having a good motivation with the wisdom, to try to the best of your ability, see what what effect your actions are going to have on others. But I was trying to think of a story from the Buddha's life that would be relevant here, where the Buddha either condones, protest against the ruler of a kingdom. And I can't think of one, actually. Well, I can kind of. It's not very close. Like when this king Ajatasattu, he was the son of King Bimbisara, right? And he was under the influence of Devadatta. Then he wanted to take over the throne. He wanted to take over. His father was the king. He's the prince in line to take the throne, and he wanted to take over the throne. And so he imprisoned his father, and he took over the throne. And then he prohibited any food being given to King Bimbisara, right? So in order to starve his father to death, right? So then the Buddha sent a message to King Bimbisara's wife, the queen, telling her that you should sneak food into the king to help sustain his life, right? So and the Buddha himself, he went up and dwelt on Vulture's Peak. So this is all happening in Rajgir. Right? So the Buddha himself, he went up and dwelt on Vulture's Peak, and every day he would walk in a particular place where he knew that the king could see him. So the Buddha is directly acting against, the king. So the king at that time had become a Ajatasattu, but he's a totally, unethical, ruthless kind of person at that time. Later he became one of the most devoted followers of Buddha, but at that time he was acting in a totally unethical, wrong, and very destructive way. And the Buddha himself acted in a way that's clearly showing he's disapproves of and is against what the king is saying. Anyway, that's one kind of example. But another one is in the Vinaya. There's advice, given for when among ordained people, when someone is clearly acting in disregard for the Vinaya, acting against the principles of the Vinaya, how to deal with that person. There's a lot of advice given. So it is, taught basically that you can't let things go. You can't let a person just keep on acting in the way that is clearly disregarding the rules that have been agreed upon by that community, and by acting that way that they're bringing about harmful effect, destruction and deterioration of the morality and the kind of well-being of the community. And so the monks should do things to show their approval of and to discipline the person who's. So in short, I think it's. Yeah, okay. Joy, I see your question here in the chat. I'll come to it in just a second, and I'll unmute you in just a second. One second. So no, I think it's a little different for a Buddhist ordained person and a Buddhist lay person, right? Because as an ordained person, we have to be a little bit more careful about taking political sides, right? But But definitely as a Buddhist layperson, I think with a good motivation, I don't see any problem with protesting. Yeah, and I think if you have a good motivation and you feel like it's really needed, then yeah, it would be good. And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of I better go on to other people's questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Joya.
Yeah, but to go back to that story, ultimately Bimbisara, the father, died because we know Ajatashatru as a killer of his father. And he also, later in life, he had to come to the Buddha, and the Buddha said all kinds of things to him to make him feel better. But
As he
so
does.
the question is, I mean, really, it's a very ordinary question from a very ordinary person's view. Why couldn't the Buddha have dissuaded Ajatashatru from starving his father to death?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a question. I don't know. I don't know. In short, I mean, at that time, Ajatasattu was strongly under the influence of Devdutt. And so Devdutt was really turning Ajatasattu's away from the Buddha, you know. Devdutt was trying to create a division in the Sangha. So, yeah, I think at that time, I mean, we just have to conclude that Ajatasattu's mind was not opening to receiving advice from a Buddha at that time. Otherwise, of course, the Buddha would have given him advice. If there was any way, you know, that he could have prevented that, the Buddha would have. But there's some things, you know, people's behavior or the suffering of people, some things the Buddha can't do anything about. Like there's a great story from the end of the Buddha's life. I mean, a very eye-opening kind of story. I'm not sure. There's a better word for it, but a very intriguing story from the end of Buddha's life. You must have heard of where the Shakyas are. There's a neighboring kingdom. I think I forget the Vijayans or something. They want to. They have some. Huh?
The king Prasenati.
I think it's his son, King Prasenat's son, I think. But yeah, but this neighboring kingdom of the Shakyas, he wants to take revenge on the Shakyas out of some kind of personal animosity. And the Buddha knows that. And the Buddha actually does something to try to, he warns the Shakyas that, you know, this is going to happen. But it's like the Buddha can't, it's their karma to have that happen to them is so strong, the Buddha can't do anything to help them, really. And it happens. I mean, the Shakyas are slaughtered in mass. And basically, that's the end of the Shakya kingdom, end of the clan. Anyway, so yeah, there's some things. I mean, if the Buddha could, you know, just enlighten us all, he would, right? But there's some karma we just have to experience. We're not open to change. And then about the 4 powerful rivers you asked, right? In the chat, in that prayer. It is, well, they're explained different ways. The most common way is to explain that they're the rivers of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Birth, old age, sickness, and death. That's the most common way to explain those. There's one other way, but I don't remember it offhand. Maybe it might be from within the you know, the list of the 6 sufferings and the 8 sufferings of samsara. But anyway, that's the main one. Okay, other questions?
We've got nothing in the chat on my side. And I'm going to check Facebook.
Okay, I've got one here. My friend from Lithuania.
Oh, there you go. Osteas, yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Osteas. Welcome back.
I want to ask, all great lamas of Tibet, usually out of compassion, returns again into this world of samsara and do not choose nirvana. In a lot of Buddhist scriptures for us practitioners, usually say that we want to reach liberation, nirvana. But I was thinking, maybe for us, it's also useful to return again to samsara out of compassion to help others.
Definitely, we should have that aspiration. It's true. But oftentimes people kind of make the mistake that, that when, Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, when they return to samsara to benefit sentient beings, that it means they're necessarily in samsara, actually. So we have to understand what samsara is. Basically, samsara, it's not a place that you go to or you go out of. It's a state of mind, right? So what state of mind is it? It's the state of mind whereby your mind is under the control of afflictive emotions and karma, right? So that what you experience, you don't have control over it. Just like, like when we have dreams at night, do you control what you dream? For the most part, no. It's forces in the mind project this kind of reality of the dream. We don't have control over what happens in our dreams. So that samsara is just like that. We don't have control over, and so like death is kind of like going to sleep. And then taking rebirth is like arising in a dream. That when we die, we don't have control of where we're born. And then once we're born, the experiences in that life, we don't have control over what kind of experiences we have, what happens to us. So that's what samsara is. So when Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, when they appear in samsara, like in the form of His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lamas of Rinpoche, other lamas, and so forth, or Shakyamuni Buddha, when they appear in samsara to benefit sentient beings, it's not the case that they're not in control of what they experience and what happens in their minds, right? They're not, their minds are not under the control of afflictive emotions and karma. They don't have anger, they don't have attachment, they don't have ignorance. So it's not, and they don't experience suffering like we do. So they only experience, bliss. Basically, they have total blissful experience, but they show the aspect of having sickness and having headaches and maybe becoming angry, becoming upset, because that's what accords with our karma. That's what we can see. We can't see a pure being. So something like that. But we should definitely. So, I mean, a more accurate kind of way to aspire to benefit sentient beings is not that we remain in samsara, as in that we remain under the control of afflictive emotions and karma in order to benefit sentient beings, because that doesn't make any sense. Because as long as we're stuck in the mud, how can we help someone else get unstuck from the mud, right? So in order to benefit sentient beings, actually we have to abandon all of our afflictive emotions and the root of those, ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, from the root. Only then can we benefit sentient beings. But we should aspire that even when we achieve that state of nirvana, that instead of striving for a state of nirvana whereby we just abide in perfect peace and don't do anything to help anyone, that rather we achieve, I mean, the state of Buddhahood is also called non-abiding nirvana, right? Non-abiding nirvana. That means nirvana whereby we do not abide in a state of peace, but rather, although we've achieved nirvana, we again project appearances. We project emanations of ourselves into that appear in the minds of, or in the experience of, in the lives of ordinary beings, and then we teach them the Dharma to try to lead them to freedom from samsara.
And what is the best motivation and the best dedication before daily practice, for example, Om Mani Padme Hum or Green Tara? What is the best dedication and the best motivation? Okay,
so yeah, motivation and dedication are basically the same thing, but just one comes before practice and one comes after the practice. So motivation at the beginning of the practice, of course, the best is bodhicitta motivation, right? So recognizing how every experience, every pleasant experience, every happiness we've ever had in the past, every happiness we ever have now, that will ever have in the future, up to full enlightenment, all comes about in dependence upon other sentient beings. And these countless other sentient beings are all just the same as oneself in wanting to have lasting happiness and wanting to be free from every form of suffering. So therefore, in order to benefit, to free other sentient beings from suffering and give them perfect happiness, I want to do whatever I can. And the best thing I can do is to become fully enlightened, thereby, in order to become fully enlightened, in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to other sentient beings, I'll engage in this practice, right? So then at the end of the practice, when you dedicate, basically you dedicate the same, thinking that, you know, by the power of whatever virtue and merit I've created through this practice, may all sentient beings be free from every suffering, and may they have every happiness up to full enlightenment. May I myself quickly become enlightened in order to do the most that I can to achieve that. And especially because, I mean, the only explanation, really accurate explanation of the path to full enlightenment is the Buddhist teachings. Then may the Buddhist teachings continue to flourish for a long time. So dedicate.
Can I ask one more question? For example,
Yes.
when I dedicate my merit, I have very less faith that this will help to have sentient beings, you know, to
But what, I don't understand. When you dedicate your merit, you have very less, what?
very less faith that this will help to liberate others, you know.
Very less faith?
Yes, that my merit will help others.
Oh, you're not sure if your merit will help others or not.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a good question, if it really will or not. Will it help you? Do you have some faith that your merit will help you?
I don't want to be selfish. I don't
No,
want to
no,
be
but to help others, you also need to have good fortune, right?
But actually, I want to that my merit would help others, but I'm not sure that my merit will help. So I'm facing the same problem also when I'm doing Tonglen.
Oh, yeah, that you're not sure if it'll really help others or not.
Yes, I'm facing the same problem when I'm doing my daily mantra and when I'm doing the Tonglen too.
But on stages, you are dependent arising. So you do not exist in isolation from others, right? Just like, you know, think of the cells of our body. They all depend upon each other. They all have different functions, like the cells of your blood, the cells of your brain, the cells of, you know, in your mouth and your digestive system, the cells in your heart, the cells in your lungs. They all perform different functions. And yet, you know, when any of those cells is healthy and flourishing, it helps all the other cells in the body. When any of the cells in the body is sick and weak and can't function well, indirectly it harms all the other cells in the body, right? Yes. True? Where are you? Have you gone to the bathroom or something?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So it's just like that. If something benefits you, like in a substantial way, in a wholesome way, indirectly that benefits all the other sentient beings, right? If something benefits other sentient beings, it also benefits you. We don't exist in isolation from each other. So when you dedicate, definitely it benefits, good for your mind. It's a positive state of mind. And so definitely, very directly, it benefits your mind. By benefiting your mind, indirectly, it's going to benefit countless others, right? But also, you have to think more about the power of prayer. I mean, you could read about studies on the power of prayer. There's many good studies done showing that it does work, but the medium by which it works is difficult to explain, to identify. And then the same with Tonglen. I mean, Tonglen, definitely it helps the person practicing Tonglen. There's no question. Now, whether it helps the person that you're meditating on, taking away their suffering, if it really directly benefits that person or not, it is difficult. It's a difficult question. It's not easy. But I think as our minds become more powerful, they have a more powerful effect on other people. So you can imagine someone who has a very, you know, like look at examples. Look at how many people have, you know, when they're in the presence of someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, how powerfully it affects their mind. There's no question about it. So then, yeah, so what's going on there, right? That power is through the force of their practice over many lifetimes, right? Through the power of their prayer, the power of their intention. So, I mean, of course, we're at a very baby level now, so it's difficult to see tangibly that our minds have much effect on others, but they do. You know, when we're in a really good mood, you know, then other people, they feel that. when we're in a really bad mood, it really disturbs other people around us. So you can kind of, think about it in some of those ways. But it's a good question, and it's good to, it's a good thing to check and analyze.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, I think I won't take any more questions now, and let's do a little bit of meditation. Just 10 minutes meditation, and then we'll have 10 minutes of some little discussion groups. Yeah. So get comfortable wherever you are. Try to bring your mind within. Focus on an object of meditation, your breath, or placement meditation, your breath or your mind, or something else for a minute or so to generate some concentration. So His Holiness has taught most of this short text on the practice of Bodhisattvas, 37 practices of Bodhisattvas, that told an example. So the refrain of each of the 37 verses teaching the 37 practices, this is a practice of Bodhisattvas. Okay. So first of all, check for yourself if you aspire to practice like a Bodhisattva. If you aspire to the Bodhisattva path, and what is the essential attitude of a Bodhisattva? Right? When it says this is the practice of Bodhisattvas, what is a Bodhisattva? And what is the essential attitude that a person has that makes them a Bodhisattva? Let's just reflect on that for a couple minutes. And check for yourself, to what degree do you have that attitude? And how can you increase it? And then why don't you just use the next, I don't know, last few minutes of meditation. Just try to remember some of the advice, either that His Holiness gave or some of the advice of Thokme Sangpo in his composition. What pieces of advice stick out to you in your own mind? Stood out for you that you want to try to put more effort into practicing in the future. Mhm. So let's pause there. And then, yeah, break up into discussion groups for, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. And then we'll come back at the end and just dedicate briefly. So Felipe, how many people we have? 9?
We have 9, including yourself and myself, so 7 actually.
Yeah, so make 2 groups.
Okay.
2 or 3 groups. You can put me in a group.
I can put you in a group? Okay, cool. I'll make 3.
So maybe make 3 groups. That's good.
All right, so 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm starting then now.
Time in this world, in places where they have flourished before and have declined, such as India, may they flourish once again. And places where they've never spread before, such as the Middle East, Africa, South America, North America, Europe, and so forth, may they spread and flourish there for a long time, bringing boundless benefit to sentient beings. Especially may all the aspirations and prayers of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lamas of Rinpoche, and other gurus be perfectly fulfilled. In short, all the aspirations of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be fulfilled. And may all of our own actions never cause even the slightest harm to any sentient being, but only bring about the well-being, contribute towards the welfare and the well-being of ourselves and others. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, may oneself too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world. And then I'll share my screen. Oh, I don't. Oops. I didn't put it up. Anyway, we pray for the long and stable life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and all of the other teachers. And especially may the global warming, the current crises of global warming, climate destruction, may be quickly reversed, and may we totally eliminate reliance on fossil fuels and be able to protect the natural environment of the planet for all creatures who depend upon it now and in the future. And may we quickly find a cure to COVID-19 and eliminate all the hardships brought about by this global pandemic. Okay, thank you. And see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Venerable. See you tomorrow. Thank you.